Okay, hopefully this works. Hello, students who are tuning into sales from home. I wasn't able to stream on Zoom, but I'm making this recording for all of you. And hello and welcome back to those of you who are here in person. Good to see you all. Since I've seen you, you have the pleasure of taking the midterm exam. And well, hopefully that was a pleasant experience for you. I'm going to, is there anyone here who has not taken the exam? Everyone's taken it, who's here? Okay, good, excellent. I think everyone, even the special postponed exams have been taken. They've been emailed to me. I'm going to start grading because I know you guys want an answer right away, and I know it's important because we're really not that far off from the final. So this will be a great diagnostic tool for you guys to see where, if at all, you're having any problems or have any blind spots. So I'm really going to buckle down and try to get those graded as quickly as possible. And they go pretty quickly because they're short answer. It's a short answer exam. Okay, let me pull up. Any questions before I dive into the exam? I feel like it's been some time since we've last seen each other, so let's catch up a little bit. Anything new going on? Anything, questions you want to ask about where we are in the course? I'm going to remind you about that very soon. Here it is. Sales midterm. Let me ask this before we jump into the questions. I've got them here and I'll be reading them out. Was there plenty of time to do the exam, or did you feel like it was rushed? Anyone feel kind of rushed, like there was time pressure a little bit? Just about right. So I shouldn't add more questions. I think 8 questions in an hour is plenty. Okay. As I told you, I don't want to test your stamina or your speed. I want to test your knowledge. But sometimes it's hard for me to gauge, and students don't speak up. But I think I have a sense of not to add more questions, but it's pretty decent. Let's look at the midterm, and then we'll come back to the perfect tender rule and the new substance of the course. Okay, I've got it here. I'm going to read it out. We've got 8 questions of equal weight. Number 1, if a sales contract includes a merger clause, will this clause prevent the parties from bringing in evidence regarding trade usage in order to supplement the written terms of the contract? And the answer is that no, a merger clause will not prevent parties from bringing in evidence of trade usage. The merger clause only has the effect of preventing consistent additional terms from coming into the contract. And stop me if you have questions or if you maybe answered it a different way. Don't divulge your identity, but you might have had other approaches. And I tell you, it happens pretty regularly that I'll write an exam and I'll start reading the answers, and I'll see something like, oh, I didn't even see that. I wasn't aware of that when I put the exam together. Not so much with the short answer exams, because they're pretty straightforward, but if I write, a longer hypothetical for the final exam, sometimes you guys see things in it that I don't. And that happens with some frequency. So stop me and tell me if you see something in these problems that maybe I didn't. Number 2, what warranties are disclaimed by the phrase as is? As is will disclaim the implied warranties, namely warranty of merchantability and the warranty of fitness for a particular purpose. 3, is it necessary to pinpoint the precise moment of the acceptance of an offer in order for a sales contract to be valid? The answer is no. There is no requirement that the moment of contract formation, offer acceptance be pinpointed. We've done away with those formalities all. And you could go on from there, I imagine, but I think that would be sufficient for a full. Really, this is kind of a conclusory answer. I tell you guys, don't give me conclusory answers. Show me your work, show me your thinking. But there are truly some answers that are nothing but conclusory. Here, do you have to pinpoint the moment of acceptance of an offer? No, you do not have to do that. You might add contracts can be proven in any manner. And you don't have to pinpoint the time. Wizard Incorporated, this is number 4. We're already almost halfway through. Wizard Inc. sent a purchase order to Wands LLC, like Magic Wand, Wands LLC, for 10,000 bright silver metal magic wands. Wands responded by shipping 10,000 wooden wands in the hope that they would be acceptable. Was a contract formed? The answer to that is yes, a contract would be formed because the shipment of goods, whether they're conforming or non-conforming, will constitute an acceptance. Unless the seller gives notice that the items that are shipped are offered as an accommodation rather than being an acceptance. Okay. I'm feeling a hush of dread in the room. So maybe that's just my overactive imagination. 5. A sales contract contains the following language. And this is all in capital letters, obviously conspicuous. All warranties of whatever nature, whether express or implied, are hereby disclaimed. When the product sold turned out to be defective, can the buyer sue for a breach of the warranty of merchantability? And the answer is yes. You can sue for breach of the warranty of merchantability because that warranty was not effectively disclaimed. The disclaimer of the warranty of merchantability requires that you use the word merchantability, which isn't in this disclaimer. And then just a side note that you wouldn't have to answer, but just because I like reminding you of stuff, that you don't necessarily have to use merchantability to disclaim the warranty of merchantability if you use those magic words as is. That will do it, even if you don't use the word merchantability. But the general rule is you want a conspicuous disclaimer that mentions the word merchantability. Okay, that's 5. We're on to 6. If a purchase order is sent with one set of terms and conditions, and a subsequent acceptance with its own terms and conditions contains a proviso clause, how do you determine which terms come into the contract? The answer to that is if there is a proviso clause in the acceptance, then which says, the proviso clause says that this acknowledgement will only operate as an acceptance if the seller assents to the terms and conditions herein. And then if there is no explicit assent, then the acknowledgement is viewed as an offer that was never accepted. There is a contract that's formed, we presume, evidence of which is performance of the contract. So there was a contract. And the terms of the contract would be those terms upon which the writings agree, or those supplemented by the UCC. So a short acceptable answer would be that if there's a proviso clause and there's no explicit assent by the seller, then the terms of the agreement are those upon which the writings agree, in addition to those supplied by the UCC. As long as you get that part in, we'll get you full credit. And that's, of course, 2207, the Battle of the Forums. Let's see, that was 6, 2 more, 7. Well, this is a long one, but 8 was pretty short. I tried to not get too complicated in my hypotheticals. Now, number 7. The principal of a nursery school went to a furniture store to purchase new chairs for the school's classrooms. The salesman showed him a red chair on the showroom floor that was the perfect size for the young students. The principal thought the bright color would liven up the classroom and ordered 100 of the chairs. When the chairs arrived, they were black. What cause of action would the school have if the store refused to allow the school to return the chairs? Okay. What cause of action would the school have if the store refused to take them back? Right? They're asking them to take them back. That's not what they ordered. They're refusing to take them back. What is the cause of action there? The cause of action would be a breach of an express warranty, because we had a showing of a sample or a model that was red, and there was reliance on that issue. It went to the basis of the bargain, and we thought the color would liven up the classroom. So the cause of action would be a breach of an express warranty. Finally, this is a short one. What are the formal requirements for a firm offer to be enforceable? You want the firm offer to be signed by the seller, and ideally to state the quantity. Or you could, I think something about the quantity should be mentioned. In the statute, of course, it says that a firm offer will not be enforced beyond the quantity stated therein. Let's look at that. Firm offers. No, that's what I just said was statute of frauds, of course. You're talking about firm offers, so all you need is a writing that's signed by the seller. And it'll be held open for the time stated, but there's no need to state the time. If no time is stated, then a reasonable one will be provided no longer than 3 months. So what are the requirements? It has to be basically just signed by the seller. Okay, so that's it. That's number 8. Any questions about any of those? I hope you found them fair. It's open book, and you could just look up 205 and see what the requirements of the firm offer are. So, won't feel too badly for you guys. But I still stand by the idea. I went back and forth for a while about whether open book makes a big difference. I don't feel like it makes a big difference on the ability of students to master the material, because I think you really got to know it. You can never rely on your notes or your book. Maybe for one or two things here and there, like quickly looking at the elements of a firm offer. But if you're talking about, how to figure out what the terms of a contract are, and there's a proviso clause, you're not going to be able to look that up and teach it to yourself. You really got to understand that whole analysis. So I think to have an open book has limited value to the student, but it does seem to make students happier. Whenever I say open book, it's like everyone seems a little more relaxed and happy. So, why not give you guys that illusion for a little while? Okay. No questions? I'll just leave it at that. You'll be getting your graded exams back, and when I grade exams, it's my practice to give an explanation every time I deduct a point. So I type it right into the exam so that there's no mystery about why I deducted a point if I did. What else do I want to say about that? And then I will send you, when I finish grading them, I will, if you'd like, I'll post the scores. And then if you ask me, I can send you the exam itself with my comments. And then if you want to discuss further after reading my comments, it may make everything clear. But if you want to then discuss further, I'm happy to do that, set up a Zoom call or something. So that's kind of how we're going to go through this review period. We're not going to be, we're going to do the review period immediately as soon as I finish grading. All right, well, let's get back to our adventure exploring Article 2 of the UCC, and we've come a long way. If we get the table of contents for Article 2 here, we can see how we made it through Part 2, statute of frauds, parole evidence, the formation of a contract. We have in 312 through 316, we talked all about warranties and how to disclaim warranties. I want to show you a few things along the way here that we're not going to spend any time doing in particular, but I want you to at least know that they're there. And that is here in this 2304, 2305, 6. These are the provisions that we're talking about when we say that the terms of a contract will be those terms upon which the writings agree, plus any supplied by the UCC. And I've kind of explained what those are and how they come up, but here they actually are. If you have an open price term, then the court will supply a reasonable price at the time of delivery. Whether something should be delivered in single lots or several lots. What happens if you don't detail where you want the delivery to happen? Well, there's a default rule. The place for delivery of goods is the seller's place of business. That's the general rule. And we all know that when we want to buy something, we go to the place of business, the store typically, to pick it up. And that is the general rule, unless you provide some other agreement. So that's I just wanted to show you those. We spent plenty of time talking about warranties, and you hopefully will have an appreciation now for how central warranties are to Article 2 and how they're likely to be tested, because when something goes wrong in a hypothetical in an Article 2 sales problem, it's usually a breach of a warranty. So that is often the focus of exam problems. I wanted to look quickly at these, which are shipping terms. FOB, FAS, CIF, These are shorthand terms that address a number of issues that arise in a sales transaction, such as which party, the buyer or the seller, which one has to get insurance to cover the goods if they're damaged during shipping? Who pays if it's an international transaction? Who pays customs duties? Is it going to be the buyer or the seller? Who's going to pay for the freight? These are all the kind of logistical details involved with the shipping of goods. And what we have here in the UCC is the use of traditional. This wasn't invented by the drafters of the UCC, but these are customary terms that are used in contracts for the sales of goods. They're shorthand, and each of these shorthand terms, like FOB, means free on board. And then that's defined in the UCC what that means. And basically, it's going to be free on board is that the seller has the duty to hire a crane to lift up the goods and deposit them on the deck of a ship. And then from that moment, the responsibility is on the buyer to pay freight and all the other incidental costs of shipment. So that's free on board. Free alongside, FAS, is similar but different. Now instead of the dividing line of responsibility be where at the moment where the goods are touched down on the deck of the ship, free alongside sets that boundary at the edge of the ship. So as soon as you lift it up by crane and you start swinging it over, when it crosses the rail of the ship, that's when the responsibilities shift. And there are a number of these terms which start with terms that are very favorable to the seller, and then it evolves to terms that are favorable to the buyer. We can take a look at free on board. It says when the term is free on board, the place of shipment, the seller must at that place ship the goods in the manner provided in 2504 and bear the expense and risk of putting them on the deck of the ship in the possession of the carrier. Free alongside. The seller must, at his own expense and risk, deliver the goods alongside the vessel in the manner usual in that port or dock. So you see that's where the UCC will give further details about what the actual terms are. We didn't spend any time going into these because they're basically, these terms, shipping terms, used by the UCC are not frequently used. Instead, we have another set of shipping terms that are similar but different and more developed and more broadly accepted, which are the Incoterms, which are drafted primarily for international transactions, but also are used in domestic transactions. And they have basically the same terms, free on board, free alongside, etc., ex-works. I think there are 11 of them altogether, 11 or 13. And those are the ones that have been kind of adopted by industry. The ones that are provided in the UCC, there was actually a movement to delete them, when revising Article 2, to do away with the shipping terms because they weren't being used anymore. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. It just tells you what the different responsibilities are. So you will get more familiar with them as as you're involved in transactions. I didn't want to spend a bunch of time, going through the details of each of the shipping terms. But know that they're there. I'll say one more thing about drafting, using them in a contract. And it saves time and saves time negotiating and drafting if you can just use these shorthand terms that everyone understands. But when you put them into a contract, you say the goods shall be delivered free on board, FOB. And you'll want to, in parentheses or somehow after that, explain which version of free on board you're referring to. If it's the UCC, say the UCC. But as is more common, if it's the Incoterms, you put Incoterms and then the version of the Incoterms that you're referencing, the most recent version of them. There's a great chart that I hand out in my international business transactions course that really colorfully illustrates the different shipping terms. I won't burden you with that chart. Maybe I should next time around share it. It is a pretty chart. But those are the shipping terms I wanted you to be aware of. That's more kind of it's more straightforward stuff. All right, so where we are now is part 5, performance. And what we're really talking about here is what are the rights and obligations of the party when actually performing the contract. All right, you enter into a great contract, you figured out all the issues with battle of the forms, and you have an understanding of what the terms of the agreement are, but now it's time to deliver the goods and for the buyer to make payment of the goods. What are the rules regarding that? And what I want to do is, let me put this screen up. And maybe we can make a little timeline or a chart here, some kind of constellation of rights and duties to illustrate what exactly I'm talking about. I'm just going to get started here. All right, there's the duty of delivery. That's for this is the seller's duty. The perfect tender rule is what governs that duty. And that's in 9601 is where it's stated. And it's stated in a kind of a roundabout way, but this is the core of it. Stated in kind of a negative. If the goods or the tender of delivery fail in any respect to conform to the contract, the buyer may reject the whole, accept the whole, or accept any commercial units, and reject the rest. Okay, we'll talk about rejection in a moment. But if the goods or tender fail, deliver in any respect to conform to the contract, the buyer doesn't have to pay for it. Stated in a positive sense, this rule is saying that the seller must make perfect tender. And what does perfect tender mean? That it is in conformance with the contract. That everything about the delivery, from the quality of the goods to the timing of delivery to the way that they're packaged, everything needs to conform to the contract. And if it doesn't conform to the contract, then the buyer can reject it. So that's the perfect tender rule in 601. Now, the delivery is followed by the acceptance. There's a duty for the buyer to accept. And if the tender is perfect and the buyer has this duty to accept it and then pay for the goods. They also have the ability, if it's not perfect, they can reject the goods. It's not perfect. What happens if there is a rejection of the goods? There will be a right to cure, and this is a right to cure that the seller benefits from. It's in 2508. I'm trying to give you the kind of the overview here and how these multiple concepts fit together as kind of one constellation of the rights and obligations of the seller and buyer. So the organization could maybe be better, but I think we're getting them on the board here at least. So the seller's has this duty of delivery, and it's perfect tender. If it is a perfect tender, then the buyer has to accept it and then pay for it. But if it's not perfect tender, if there's something wrong with it, it doesn't, it's the wrong color chair, for example, and then that breaches an express warranty. But you don't even need the breach. It's just if it's not perfect in some way, there's an option to the buyer to reject it. They do reject it, however, this right to cure is triggered, which means the seller has the right to make things right, typically by substituting another delivery of the red chairs. They sent the wrong chairs, they sent the black ones. So they have a right to cure by sending substitute goods. If there is acceptance, right, the buyer accepts the goods, but then later finds out that something is wrong with the goods, right? He couldn't detect it. It was a latent defect, and he couldn't detect it until 2 weeks in. There is a right to revoke acceptance. The right to revoke acceptance. Basically turning it into a rejection. And then again, there would be a right to cure. It would lead to right to cure. All these things are here in part 6. Now, as we saw in 601, if the delivery is not perfect, so here if we're not perfect, there is a buyer has a right to reject the goods. Say, I'm not accepting them, send them back to the warehouse. Or they can accept. There isn't an obligation to reject. There is an option to either reject the goods, which sets in motion the process of curing the goods, hopefully, and getting a conforming shipment. You could accept the goods and then later on find out that there was a latent defect and revoke your acceptance, thereby rejecting the goods. If you receive defective goods, like you order red chairs and you receive a shipment of black chairs, you can accept them. You have the right to accept them. You don't have to reject them. And by accepting them, you preserve your right to sue for a breach of warranty. Imagine how that would work. Let's say the red chairs cost $10 more than the black chairs. There's fancy dye and pigment and process of painting them, so the red chairs are $10 more than the black chairs. And the manufacturer delivers the black chairs. The buyer can accept them and then sue for a breach of an express warranty. You can accept the black chairs, but then say, all right, I want to let you know that I'm suing you for a breach of express warranty because they're red instead of black. And I paid a $10 premium for the red chairs, and I want that sent back to me. I want that refunded. And that makes the parties whole again. So you have the right, if the non-conforming goods are delivered, they're not perfect, you got the right to just reject them, triggering the right to cure, or you have the right to accept them and then sue for the defect, if there's any harm caused by the defect or the non-conformity. So I guess my goal in putting this up here is for you to understand how the perfect tender rule, the buyer's duty to accept them if they do comply, if they are perfect, but if they're not perfect, the right to reject. Again, if they're rejected, there's a right to cure. And I also want you to be aware of this revocation of acceptance if there's a latent defect. You can still revoke your acceptance, but that would trigger a right to cure as well. And I think that gives us kind of a general overview of the things that we're going to be looking at. Any questions about this? I know it's yearning to be documented in a one-page handout. The next segment of the course, kind of tied into this, will be remedies. You know, what are the remedies if the goods aren't perfect, and you accept them but sue for breach of a warranty, of an express warranty about them being red instead of black? What are the remedies if there is this breach? And that'll be the next and final segment of the course. And they're what you'd expect them to be. If non-conforming goods are shipped, there's a right to reject them and get a refund. If they are accepted and there's a breach of the warranty of merchantability, you have the right to sue for the harm that was caused. Make yourself whole. I do have a one-page handout for remedies, which I feel good about sharing with you guys, and I will after this class, before our next class, so that you have in front of you all the different remedies that are available to the buyer versus the seller. So that's the next topic that kind of ties in with this. Okay. Well, let me see if my textbook connected. It doesn't look good, but okay. All right. Well, this is looking good. Come on. Why don't we take a little break here, as we're wont to do. This is a good place to kind of stop, and I will struggle with this, try to get my book up and running, and we'll get back together in 5 minutes. So take a break. We'll come back and kind of get into the problems. Is anyone else having trouble accessing the internet in your textbooks? Is it just me?
No, but you might be connected to the student or the guest one instead of the regular one.
Yes, yeah.
Sometimes I get booted to that and then my computer doesn't work.
That is probably part of the problem, at least. Yeah.
You can also utilize that computer Zoom, because they now have like 3 cameras.
Uh-huh.
Like most professors use that Zoom.
Yes, yes.
Because it's directly connected to the
That's good to know. I wish you had mentioned it a couple of months ago, but it's good to know. Yeah, it didn't occur to
The
me.
microphone is also
Yeah, I haven't received any complaints from the students at home, but you're right, the quality is probably a little better.
when like the laptop is not working.
Yeah.